Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL News Radio. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. Only 4 days away until BYU takes on the East Carolina Pirates in Greenville. We're breaking down the matchup with an ECU insider, Stephen Igoe, coming up a little bit later in the show. But right now, let's get some updates on some BYU personnel in our top story of the day.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
So some newsy items from BYU football head coach Kalani Sitake. He addressed the media on Zoom earlier this week. About 23 minutes or so Kalani Sitake spent with the media. I'll say the Zoom interactions are always, I wish we still had the in-person. It's been 6 years since that happened. It's always been Zoom since COVID. It's fine. It's okay. But I kind of miss the in-person interaction with Kalani Sitake and his weekly press conferences. But in his virtual setup, he did give some updates on personnel. And I must say, too, it's nice with the player availability reports beginning next week in the Big 12. I think there's more of an openness to just be pretty transparent with injuries. I think Kalani has been better than most. He will kind of shoot it to you straight. Sometimes you dance around some of the injuries, kind of leave it up in the air. But for the most part, he's been pretty transparent the past few years with these injuries. And he did give some updates on players. One in particular, Justin Kirkland, defensive tackle, transfer from Oklahoma State. He missed fall camp. What's the latest on Kirkland? This was Kalani.
Looking forward to it. We'll see how it looks this week. Last week he practiced. That's a good sign, and practiced with pads on. So that's even better sign. So now we'll see how it goes this week. But he's got a lot of competition too, because there's a lot of guys that have been working and developing at the interior D line. And so it'll be good. But it's nice to have him back at it and running the practices and being involved with the team.
Justin Kirkland would be a huge boost to this interior of the defensive line, and it would be a huge boost to add additional help to Keanu Tanavasa and John Talmoy-Payau, who have been really good in the first 2 weeks of the season. But you look at that defensive tackle unit, if you do add Justin Kirkland, who's the backup nose to Keanu Tanavasa, you've got Anisi Purcell, Ulavai Fetuli, Kaufusi Pofoke. You've got a lot of talented players in the interior, but Kirkland rounds out the group. There were high expectations for him when he transferred in during the spring transfer portal window. His wife a couple weeks back hinted that he'd be making his return. She said something on social media. He's been dealing with an knee injury that's kept him out for an extended period of time, but he is a massive body. You're talking 340 plus in the interior for a defense that's already number one in the country in total defense, and then to add potentially a 340-pound body in the middle, along with Keanu Tanavasa, along with John Talmoy-Payau. It's big news for BYU football. Weylin Lapuaho has also been missing, an interior offensive lineman, left guard. He's been dealing with an injury. This was Kalani on BYU star senior offensive lineman, Weylin Lapuaho.
Yep, he practiced last week, and it's full go, and we're excited to have him back.
BYU should be excited to have him back because 2 weeks ago against Stanford, it was a little bit of a rotation at left guard. There was Sonny Makasini. It was Kyle Safarachuk. A little bit of rotation. Kyle Safarachuk kind of played the best, I thought, at left guard in that Stanford game. But Weylin Lapuaho, I think, could be the best offensive lineman on this team. So his addition is massive for BYU. He was used seldomly in fall camp, misses the first 2 games, and maybe that's nice to just be completely ready to go for the first road game and then ultimately Big 12 play. So things are working nicely for BYU in the interior of the trenches, both offensive line and defensive line. One downside, though, on the injury front is linebacker Choe Bryant-Strother, who was one of the stars of fall camp. He was in contention with Siali Asera to basically be 1A and 1B at the MAC linebacker position as those two were rotating. This was Kalani on Choe.
Yeah, I mean, we'll let him make any statements or any announcements that he wants to do. Right now, I'm letting him decide on how he wants to announce what's going on with him and his health. But just want to express my love and appreciation for him, what he's done for our program. So that's That's pretty much what it comes down to.
It's not good. Not good at all for Choe Bryant-Strother. And so BYU is going to have to move forward without Choe. You know, when Kalani goes the route of let the guy make the statement, that's code for Big 12 Media Day. Jake Retzloff. Yeah, it's usually not positive. Let's just say that. Choe Bryant-Strother, though, was a really good player in fall camp. And again, BYU at the MAC linebacker spot, it's not all is lost. You know, Cialia Serra is excellent at that position. Max Alford, who I talked about during camp and also after that Stanford game, he's the backup MAC linebacker behind Serra. And then third string, Pearson Watson moves over from the Rovers spot to MAC. I thought that was kind of noteworthy in this week's depth chart for BYU as they get ready for East Carolina, which again kicks off 5:30 p.m. Extended pregame begins at high noon from Greenville, North Carolina. Myself and Kyle Ireland, we will get you ready for the Cougs and the Pirates. But that's some of the personnel updates for BYU this week against the Pirates. Also of note, the wide receiver position, Jojo Phillips. Kalani didn't rule out the possibility of Jojo being back this season, but it's going to take some time. The next few weeks, Kalani noted, are going to be critical in maybe painting the outlook for Jojo to potentially return this year. It's tricky with Jojo because he's already used a red shirt. Would he qualify potentially for a medical? If you could get that absolute guarantee, that would be probably the perfect situation. Say, hey, you know what? Medical red shirt this year, get completely healthy and be ready to go for winter conditioning and 2026. But you just never know with the NCAA. As we saw with Hinckley Ropati, it was reported that Hinckley Ropati has had his waiver denied, and he's still maybe looking for another avenue potentially, but time's ticking, and it seems like that opportunity is completely gone for Hinckley Ropati to potentially join the team on a medical redshirt. So you just never know with the NCAA and how they're going to decide on these rulings with injuries and whatnot. So things take time, and that's what's tricky about the Jojo Phillips wide receiver injury that he suffered in the Stanford game. But outside of those injuries, BYU is in a pretty good spot when it comes to the personnel front. Everyone else should be ready to go. But at wide receiver, the starters for this week's depth chart include Chase Roberts, as expected, Parker Kingston, and then the third guy, Cody Hagan. And Cody Hagan, big-time talent for the Cougars. He's ready to take on a bigger spotlight role for BYU this week as they head out to Greenville, North Carolina, to take on an East Carolina squad that's feeling really confident, 2-1, and it's a group that thought maybe going into the year that the defense was going to be a liability, yet similar to BYU, tops in many statistical categories, near the top rather, in many categories nationally in college football through the first 3 weeks of the season. So should be a very interesting matchup to see how BYU fares against an ECU team that's playing with a lot of confidence, but BYU is also playing with a ton of confidence as well. Let's take a break. On the other side, we'll get to more BYU ECU breakdown with an ECU insider. More here on Cougar Tracks, and it's powered by KSL Sports. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube page. This show is daily, every day, 5 days a week. We're holding it down here on Cougar Tracks. And then, of course, on Saturday nights, we've got the extended post-game show as well, reacting to BYU football action. You got all the media availabilities. Everything your BYU fan heart desires is here on the Cougar Tracks podcast feed. So make sure to subscribe, leave a rating and a review. It helps out the show a ton. So there was an interesting ranking posted by ESPN's Bill Connelly, the creator of the S&P Plus rankings. And I know that everyone's fixated on these rankings these days because, honestly, BYU has been slighted. They have. Like, if you don't want to rank BYU in the top 25, that's okay. I can understand it. It's not like BYU is just this perfect team by any stretch. I'll get to some quarterback rankings here momentarily that kind of highlight where BYU stacks up at the quarterback spot through 2 weeks. But give me some reason other than, they had a quarterback change. Jake Retzlaff leaves. They're no longer good. Bill Connelly, ESPN's S&P Plus creator, he had this tweet on X on Tuesday. I reposted it on my X. The S&P rankings for this year, if they were based solely on production in 2025 and the results of the 2025 season. And keep in mind, the S&P Plus rankings factor in recruiting and maybe 3-4 year cycles. I'd have to dive deep into the weeds of the specific metrics that determine the S&P Plus rankings. But if it's just based solely on what has taken place on the field in 2025, your number one team in the country would be Texas Tech. Number 4, BYU. How about that? You'd have Texas Tech at number 1, BYU at number 4. Again, you want to tell me the Big 12's weak? Number 8, Utah. Number 10, TCU. 4 teams in the top 10 in college football in the Big 12. Can you imagine if pollsters actually rank teams based on just what happens this year? This is the issue with college football. And I love that Bill Connelly put this out. And honestly, I wish his ratings, he would adjust. Stop factoring in everything from the past and work on just focusing on this year. That's a college football world I want to live in. And it's not solely because the Big 12 teams look glamorous. I just want to live in a world where anyone can be ranked highly. If they take chances and they dominate their opponents, that's the world I want to live in. Here's the full top 15. Number 1, Texas Tech. Number 2, Oregon. Number 3, Penn State. Number 4, BYU. Number 5, Indiana. 6, USC. No one's talking about the Trojans. They've been really good. Number 7, Washington. Number 8, Utah. Number 9, Missouri. 10, TCU. 11, Oklahoma. 12, Florida State. 13, Illinois. 14, Nebraska. And 15, Mississippi State. Oh, Arizona State lost to Mississippi State. Terrible loss, right? Man, I just love that post from Bill Connelly because, again, it shows the massive discrepancy between just focusing on this year and then letting preconceived thoughts, preseason expectations from years gone by and brands factoring into how you rank teams. I love that tweet from Bill Connelly. Speaking of rankings, quarterback rankings, the Big 12 prides itself on being the quarterback club this year in college football. I was looking at Pro Football Focus grades on the highest ranked Big 12 quarterbacks through the first 3 weeks of the season. Bear Bachmeier is rated number 11 in the Big 12. Not bad, honestly, for a true freshman and in a league that prides itself on great quarterback play this year. I thought that was a solid number. The highest rated QB, Brendan Sorsby from Cincinnati. He set a Big 12 record with 5 touchdown passes in the first quarter against Northwestern State over the weekend. They put up a 70-piece on a terrible FCS team. Josh Hoover's second. Baron Morton from Texas Tech. He's been excellent so far. Rocco Becht, Iowa State. Jalen Daniels, he rounds out the top 5 from Kansas. Noah Fafita, Avery Johnson, Devin Dampier, Taven Jackson from UCF, Sam Levitt, and then Bear Bachmeier. Below Bachmeier is West Virginia's Nico Martial, Connor Wegman from Houston, Sawyer Robertson from Baylor, Caden Salter, Colorado, Zane Flores from Oklahoma State, and then I also worked in Ryan Staub as well as a bonus because Colorado's going through a little bit of quarterback debate in Boulder. But Bear Bachmeier, in the middle of the pack, that's a good place to be, I think, for a true freshman signal caller, because you look at all those names in the Big 12, those are veteran quarterbacks, veterans in this league. And Bear Bachmeier's holding his own and doing a nice job. And I think Bear, as he gets ready to take on East Carolina, I'm really excited to see how he performs this week on the road in his first game, because East Carolina, they're looking to sell that thing out, paint the stadium gold. How is he going to perform and respond? Is he going to be the cool, calm, collected customer as he's shown through the first 2 games? Will that carry over on the road? I'd like to think it will, because his ball security, the way that he's taking care of possessions, his decision-making, I think has been really good. That gives me the confidence that that will carry over on the road for Bear Bachmeier. But it just gives you a little bit of a glimpse of, so far, he's holding up quite well against some of the best in the Big 12, including Sam Leavitt, who was the best quarterback in the league last season. Taking our final timeout, we'll get to the ECU Insider Breakdown with Stephen Igoe coming up next here on Cougar Tracks. BYU football is back from the bye week, and it's time now to head out on the road, and the Cougars will make a long trip to the East Coast, a place that Kalani Sitake is familiar with, Greenville, North Carolina, as BYU gets set to take on the East Carolina Pirates. And to get to know the foe, get to know the Pirates at an in-depth level, I'm joined now by the top guide covering the Pirates, Stephen Igoe, publisher of HoistTheColors.com on the 24/7 Sports Network. He also hosts daily radio show, Hoist the Colors. Check out all of his fine work on the 24/7 Sports Network. Stephen, appreciate you hopping on board here. Got to be exciting times right now for East Carolina.
There's no doubt. I think a lot of people have been looking forward to this game for some time. I mean, East Carolina has kind of gained a reputation really over its history for, getting up for these types of games, and getting a chance to host BYU is a big deal, especially with the way college football is going. I think teams in the American teams in the group of five are getting less of these opportunities. So in some ways, it was kind of hard not to look ahead to this game when it was announced as a 7:30 kickoff going into Coastal Carolina last week. I thought the team did a good job of, taking care of business at Coastal. They've already played in a big game this year at NC State, which is their in-state rival. Came up short in that one. So I think they're glad to get this one at home. And the last time BYU came here, really both programs were, at least for that season, in pretty bad shape. So at least to start this year, both teams seem to be trending in the right direction. I think it should make for a fun atmosphere, and what hopefully should be a really good game on Saturday night in Greenville.
Yeah, that's such a great point. That last visit to Greenville, I think ECU had the worst defense in college football. BYU had the worst offense in college football, and ECU still came out on top in that one. But these two, they've had close calls. The ones in Provo, ECU had a 14-0 lead and then tied it up, and then they had a last-second field goal, a walk-off 3 years ago in Provo. So I expect another good one here on Saturday. I'm curious, Blake Harrell, he's 7-2 as the head coach, Stephen. What's worked so well for Coach Harrell compared to some of those past coaches that we were just talking about of, Scotty Montgomery and those recent coaches the past decade? What's worked so well for Coach Harrell?
Coach Harrell, he is just such a down-to-earth, relatable guy. I mean, he really, he's worked at Lenore Ryan, the Citadel, Kennesaw State, and ECU, so he's never had like some big glamorous job. In East Carolina, it's kind of a blue-collar university. It is a very big public state university, but like it's just kind of known for being blue-collar, and kind of overachieving. And Blake, he just feels like that type of coach in many ways, like a guy that is just a very, very active with the fans, just does a great job of interacting with them, getting on their good side. And it's not even fake. Like some coaches, you can always feel, they're kind of going over the top. They're not being themselves when they're doing that sort of stuff. Well, Blake's just a regular dude, like a guy you can just sit down and have a conversation with just about anybody. And the other side of it too is he's a player's coach. He was obviously the defensive coordinator under Mike Houston since 2020, and then Mike Houston was fired midway through last year. He took over in a pretty rough situation, and I think he would even admit probably a little bit over his head at the time, but just said, all right, guys, we're going to do this for the seniors. We're going to find a way to get these guys to a bowl game. Everybody bought in. He was very real with the players. He was real with the media. He was real with the fans. And I think people just respected how upfront and real he is. And as a result, he's got buy-in from everybody. He's won the games that ECU should have won on paper. He got a big bowl win over NC State last year. They've competed well in every game since he became head coach. And he's a defensive-minded guy. So they're pretty unorthodox defensively. They do a bunch of crazy stuff, even with a new defensive coordinator coming in, and Josh Aldridge. There's a lot of similarities, and it's aggressive style. He goes for it on fourth down. He kind of plays with that house money mentality and quite a bit. They blitz a lot. They also do some pretty crazy things offensively at times. They faked a punt from their own 19 in the opener against NC State. So he's not afraid to roll the dice. At times it works, at times it doesn't. But that's the type of mentality that has kind of always led to success at ECU. Just kind of that chip on your shoulder, house money, like we're the underdog type of mentality. And historically, that's when they're at their best. And it feels like Blake has kind of brought some of that back.
Talk with Stephen Igoe of Hoist the Colors, part of the 24/7 Sports Network here on KSL News Radio and KSL Sports. I'm curious, Coach Harrell's with that defensive background, as you noted, seemed like coming into this season, maybe on paper, only 2 returning starters. Maybe that was going to be an area of question, but shutout on the road, first one in 25 years for this Pirates team, seems like maybe ahead of schedule from maybe what expectations were coming in on defensively.
I mean, definitely. The question going into the year, I mean, all the questions were around the defense. And it's, we were kind of joking on my show on Monday, like it's kind of crazy that all we talked about all preseason, because we were out of practice, man. And the offense was torching the defense, and maybe some of that was just the familiarity. They knew what scheme, what plays they're running. And, even dating back to the spring, we were like, man, this might be a long year. But it just feels like they've hit on many of the guys. We make such a big deal about the portal these days, and they have hit on some portal guys who have added specifically at corner and some depth at linebacker and along the defensive front. But like for the most part, a lot of these guys that are kind of coming out of their shell, so to speak, are guys who have developed the old fashioned way. Solid 3-star recruit. He redshirts, he stays with the program a year or two, and now like a lot of these guys are redshirt sophomores or redshirt juniors who have been in the program 2-3 years. They've been kind of developing in Blake Harrell's defense, kind of waiting their time. So that was another benefit of just promoting the interim coach to full-time. Like you had a decent amount of continuity. The problem was we had just never seen those guys play a full-time role. So now that they're on the field, a lot of these assistant defensive coaches recruited them, they developed them, so they know how to utilize them best. And they play a ton of guys defensively. I wouldn't really say there's many stars out there. The one guy is probably safety, Jamarlee Riddle. He's a really good player. But outside of that, it's like you just got a lot of guys who know how to do their job, and they kind of come at you in waves, whether it be blitzing, whether it be different coverages. They mix it up quite a bit.
Offensively, it seems like the tempo they go pretty fast. The top 20 in seconds per play on this offense. Katin Hauser at quarterback. Just maybe your overarching thoughts of the offense so far through 3 weeks, and Hauser returning and being a key piece of all of it.
Yeah, Katin, he transferred in from Michigan State last year. He was a guy that I expected him to win the job. I mean, he was the first guy to commit. He just seemed like he was fully bought in. Then they add Jake Garcia, another former big recruit. He won the job initially, and it just didn't work out. He turned the ball over too many times. Katin took over midseason. That kind of coincided with Blake getting the head job, and those two guys, along with offensive coordinator John David Baker, who's in his second year calling plays, have kind of seen this thing take off. And I think, look, anytime you've got that up-tempo, fast-paced offense, in many cases the strength is the passing game. They are, pretty good at receiver. Anthony Smith, Yannick Smith are your two outside guys. They've rotated quite a bit in the slot. Brock Spalding has been a nice surprise this year, and they feel pretty good 2-3 deep at receiver. Tight end, they really have two weapons at tight end. In my opinion, Javante Connor, Desir Riles are two of the most athletic tight ends ECU's had in the last several years. The running game is definitely, I would say, the concern at this point. I mean, you look at it, they've run for a pretty high total the last 2 weeks, but you kind of didn't really see them pop the runs until late. And a lot of that is due to the tempo. And it's kind of what they did the last half of last year. They go so fast. At times, if they get rolling, teams in the second half start to wear down a bit. And that's when you see the running game start to pop off. So that's when they're at their best. They're using that tempo. They're hitting the horizontal passing game. And then they'll take shots downfield, which Katin, since he took the job, I would say one of his strengths are those downfield passes. But to be honest, through 3 games, they haven't hit a lot of those vertical passing plays, and they've hit more underneath stuff. So it'll be interesting to see, what BYU tries to take away. Does ECU try to hit some big passing plays early? Do they stick with kind of the short game, the medium game? Can they protect versus BYU? Can they run the ball? So I think the question marks are still the running game. The offensive line at times has been hit or miss, but they certainly have some weapons out wide.
To kind of follow up on that, and again, talk with Stephen Igoe here for a few more moments. getting to know the foe, East Carolina. What are some areas of focus that you're looking at with this? You follow this ECU team as close as anyone. What are some things that you're looking to see from this group in this matchup against BYU?
I really am curious, man. Like the BYU, we know the defense is just so good, and they're so big up front and physical. ECU is just not going to be able to line up and run the ball at them. I mean, I'm sure there will be, you can't only just play East and West, so they're going to have to try to run the ball. But how much can they get into a rhythm? So much of this offense is, hey, if they're ahead of the chains, they can go to their tempo. They can do all that. They can stay on schedule, and then at times that can wear on the defense. But a BYU, if they're forcing ECU to hold them, to create penalties, if they're stopping the run and then making it 2nd and 11, 2nd and 9, 2nd and 10, that's when ECU can get into trouble. So really, to me, ECU is good on 3rd down when they're in 3rd and medium, like most offenses, but especially this offense. If BYU is able to stop them on 1st and 2nd down, put them in 3rd and long, I don't think that's a recipe for success for the Pirates. And the other thing defensively for the Pirates is, you're facing obviously Bear Bachmeier, first road start. If ECU can stop the run and put him into 3rd and long situations where he has to go through his progressions, how does he react to that in his first road start as a freshman? So if you're ECU, you want to put him in those situations, see how he responds, and if he goes out and completes some tight window throws, then maybe you have to adjust as the game goes along. But really, the first quarter for me, I think we'll be able to get a pretty good feel for maybe how the chess match is going to play out throughout the evening inside Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium.
Do you think Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium is going to be sold out, and will it be painted gold as they're hoping?
I was texting some administrators on Monday, and they're expecting at least a crowd in the mid to high 40s. The student pickup is happening Tuesday, Wednesday, so they'll really know then. It's family weekend as well. So what happens is a lot of the students, they'll bring their siblings, their parents, and so it's kind of hard. And ECUs are, really big school as far as student enrollment. So it's one of those things where they won't really know the full number until the student pickup starts to happen. There is a chance it gets to that 50K mark, which I don't think has happened since the NC State opener at home in 2022. They had 45,000 plus for App State last year, which was a fun environment. But I think they'll be right there. As far as painted gold, I don't know. ECU, they tend to play well in these spots at home. Even in Scotty Montgomery's tenure, they beat North Carolina at home when they were quite frankly terrible. They've had success against in-state foes. BYU obviously a little bit different, being a long way across the country. But I know ECU will be up for this game, and then it comes down to, as you know, execution. I think if this was on a neutral field, BYU has more talent across the board, specifically in the trenches. And that's my biggest question, is how much can ECU find a way to neutralize that? How much can they, put Bear Bachmeier in spots that potentially he's never been in at the college level, and see how he responds to that? And then you kind of take your shot with that in a tough environment.
He's Stephen Igoe, publisher of Hoist the Colors on the 24/7 Sports Network. And you can check out his radio show, 94.3 The Game, Hoist the Colors. Go on podcast. It's available anywhere. Good stuff throughout the week to follow the Pirates, so BYU fans can get to know the foe at an even deeper level. Stephen, thanks for the time. Looking forward to being out there in Greenville for the first time, and should be a lot of fun. It's going to be a good game.
Appreciate it so much, Mitch. And I will say again, my 2022 trip to BYU was one of the best games I've ever covered. And I hope ECU fans can, treat BYU fans as well as they treated the Pirates then, and, great hospitality. So looking forward to it, and hopefully the Pirates can make it a fun game on Saturday.
He's Stephen Igoe. Again, follow his work on hoistthecolors.com. Thanks to Stephen for joining me. That was really insightful commentary on the Pirates. And that's going to do it for today's edition of Cougar Tracks. We'll be back tomorrow with a Wednesday check-in, some more BYU football notes as they get ready for East Carolina. Also, some basketball notes, too, as there's some basketball media day content with the women's basketball program, hit on Lee Kumar's squad as well, and then other news and notes around BYU sports. So this has been Cougar Tracks. Subscribe to the show, leave a 5-star rating and a review. It helps out the show a ton. And I'll talk to you tomorrow here on the Cougar Tracks podcast. It's powered by KSL Sports.